Hello, AP Bio folks. This is Mrs. Ness-Deden. We are approaching the end of our second unit. Our final topic in these next few days, we're going to talk about ecosystems, energy, and conservation biology. So this kind of ties together a lot of the topics that we've been learning about in this unit. So first, let's start by making some connections. Just before the long weekend, we did some labs with fruit fly behavior and talked about learned behavior versus innate behavior and how organisms react to stimuli in their environment. Because of those individual behaviors and reacting to the cues around them, that can affect how a population is distributed within an ecosystem, whether they're clumped around resources or other types of chemical signals. And it can affect how and when and why the individuals within that population might encounter and interact with each other. Those populations then, of course, interact in complicated ways. Trophic interactions are a big part of that, but we talked about many of the other symbiotic relationships that happen within ecosystems as well. And of course, all of those living things interact with the non-living components of their ecosystem also. So this week, we're going to kind of broaden it out and look at the big picture and kind of put all of these pieces together. First, we're going to go back to this diagram, which you've seen before. There's a lot of information in here, and so I want to bring this back and have you think about it a little bit, just to remember what this is showing. And also, if you have your Unit 2 slides printed in front of you, read through the next slide and see if you can figure out how those laws connect to the diagram that you see on the screen right here. One important thing to remember as we talk about ecosystems is that living things and the ecosystems they live in have to follow these laws of thermodynamics as well. There are two laws of thermodynamics that we'll talk about a couple times in biology. One is conservation of energy. The energy can change forms, but it's never completely lost. But the second law of thermodynamics also states that every time you convert energy, in other words, as it moves from one trophic level up to the next, those conversions aren't totally efficient. And so some energy is lost as heat. It doesn't disappear, but it changes into a form that's no longer usable in the environment. We also have here the law of conservation of mass. The matter, the nutrients and the atoms that make up the substances that are being passed up through those trophic levels aren't created or destroyed. Matter recycles in ecosystems. And we're going to come back to that. You might remember learning about some nutrient cycles. We're going to come back to those at the beginning of the next unit. So I just wanted to take a minute and remind you that all of these laws of nature apply to living things as well as everything else. So as we talk about energy flow and how these organisms interact, all of this stuff is still true. Our main focus today is going to be looking at how ecosystems are controlled. In other words, how ecosystems regulate the balance of all those different species coexisting together within that area. When you picture an ecosystem, you probably think first of what we refer to as the dominant species. Like when you think of a prairie, the first thing you probably imagine is some type of grass, which is the dominant species in a prairie. The dominant species is the most abundant, has the highest biomass, but it's not always necessarily the most important. We've already talked about some ways that ecosystems can be regulated from the bottom up. So again, if you think about that energy pyramid idea, this is talking about things that occur at the lower levels, the producers and the herbivores that control everything above them. So this is things like that idea of resource or niche partitioning. Or the idea of primary productivity, the idea that the amount of producers limits everything above it, or that herbivores or lower level consumers kind of divide up the resources in one way or another to reduce competition. But there are also a lot of ways that ecosystems can be controlled from the top down. This is something that scientists didn't actually realize for quite a while. They didn't think the top of that food chain was nearly as important in controlling the ecosystem as the bottom. Today, you're going to be looking at a few case studies, starting with a video that talks about these top-down controls. In In a minute, you're going to go to a Google form that is posted in the homework for this week that contains 3 case studies. 2 of them are part of a video that's about 20 minutes long, and the third one is just some data presented to you. As you watch that video and start working through that form, listen for the terms keystone species and trophic cascade and add those definitions into your note packet. Make sure that you understand those. Read through all of the information that's given to you and look carefully at the charts and diagrams and figures that are presented. This really gives you a good idea of kind of the complex ways that organisms interact, both from the bottom up and the top down, because in ecosystems, both of these are happening at the same time. I hope you have a great afternoon. You can go and begin working on those case studies now, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Have a great day.